Hello! Today I would like to talk about two very great movies and their similarities. Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive and George Stevens' Shane. What? But Drive is a movie about cars, and Shane, well, Shane's a really old western. Like it's really old. Well, actually, they are essentially the same film. Think about it. A mysterious stranger with a morally questionable past tries to help a family in trouble in the hopes of seeking redemption. See what I mean? Only Drive has cars and Shane has horses. The opening of Drive has skyscrapers, Shane has mountains. Both films play out in the streets or in the valleys, these large objects looming over the characters.
Gosh almighty, that is good!
Mind blown yet? Not really? Okay. Well, let's look at the protagonists, Driver versus Shane. The two men work in nefarious or morally questionable worlds. Shane is a gun for hire, while Driver, well, he's a driver for hire. They both exist between the thin layer of aberrant and normative behavior, and both seek some means of redeeming their past. Both Alan Ladd and Ryan Gosling play their roles well. Ladd has a warm, homespun, folksy, philosophical edge, while Gosling has a warm heart and a kind face. Yet each have a darker side lurking below their facades. Both performances are really great. It's a matter of taste, really, as the two actors are very different in their role as the stoic outlaw. And well, let's face it, both actors are pretty easy on the eyes. Nicholas Ray put Alan Ladd's photo in Sal Minio's locker for a reason, people. The two major differences in these films are the father and son characters. George Stevens' use of the boy Joe brings the audience into the story. We see Shane through his eyes, allowing the audience to feel his admiration for Shane. While in Drive, the child takes a back seat to being a major character in the story. This decision puts more onus on the mother character, Irene, to draw out the protagonist. What both films display is the remarkable love the sons have for the outlaw, as he is the epitome of cool masculinity and the antithesis to their fathers. So the major differences between the fathers are where their struggles lie. In Drive, he's an ex-con trying to be a provider, which is an internal struggle, while in Shane, Joe Start's conflicts are mainly external. His only lust for violence is invoked when he feels his home or family threatened.
Now that you've warned me, would you mind getting off my place?
Your place!
Shane and his wife prevent him from killing in the end. In the 1950s, the father had to be strong and moral. It was just the times. Audiences weren't quite ready, or the censors for that matter, for the collapse of the American family just yet. What is neat about Drive is that by making the father character morally questionable, the audience can watch him attempt to right the situation and try to make good while he struggles internally.
But it's a shameful thing, what I did. I have a lot of making up to do.
It adds a nice extra level of character development, as opposed to the father knows the best character in Shane. What's interesting is that in both films, the protagonists look to the father with envy, as no matter how much they try, they could never take on that role themselves. While the mother characters are very similar, as they both have a crush on the protagonist, but because Irene's husband is morally compromised and vacant, she can bring herself to act on her romantic feelings. Irene must shoulder more of the burden as she acts as the audience entryway into the character of Driver. It is their friendship which brings Driver to the audience, breaking down the cool facade. While Jean MacArthur's character acts as the moral center of the family. She abhors violence and guns, and wishes for a peaceful solution to their predicament. It's only when all other avenues have been explored that she condones killing, effectively sending Shane on his errand of redemption. The casting of Albert Brooks as the villain is a wonderful choice, because Brooks has an affable quality about him, which makes for a great villain.
And so do I. So anything you need, you call me. We're a team now.
A multifaceted villain, as opposed to Emil Meyer's performance as the two-dimensional Rufus Riker, a more traditional type of villain. The rancher who wants it all, the evil capitalist versus the idealist. Brooks' casting is almost as inspiring as Sergio Leone's casting of Henry Fonda to play the villain in Once Upon a Time in the West.
Now that you've called me by name,
Well, almost. So the rest of the characters are moved around a bit, combined, or dropped entirely. Shane has a lot more supporting cast, while Drive limits the amount of characters. Both films steadily build up the plot for the final showdown. What Drive has in physical momentum, i.e. the cars, Shane has in character momentum, i.e. the homesteaders being driven off their land. What's also cool is that the Bryan Cranston character takes on some of the morality the father lacks in Drive. He acts as a sort of older brother avuncular type of character to Driver, and he is sacrificed like the Elijah Cook Jr. character in Shane. This sacrifice exacerbates the situation and demands retaliation. Now, I won't even begin to break down the differences between the Ron Perlman and Jack Palance characters, except they are both exceptional as the bad guy's henchman/partner. Both actors do their bit to bring an air of danger and menace to their films. Okay, so Drive's visual style is great. It has a strong use of composition, staging, and color theory. When a character is walking, the camera tracks the character, and it kind of looks like when you look out the window of a car. Neat, huh? The camera mimics the engine of a story, a car. There are moments of movement and moments of pause, just like when you're driving in traffic. Drive is a kind of restricted cinema style. It locks the performer in for a very limited movement, more akin to still photography or comic book panel. It's just a different kind of way of shooting. This forces the actor to work within the frame and pour out as much as possible out of their face and posture in the small space provided. A similar sort of style could be seen in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. This style can have its drawbacks, but I'll talk about that a little later. Looking at Shane, you might think it lacks the visual flair and strong composition, which is just not true. The problem is that this was George Stevens' first color feature. As most of his contemporaries who were used to shooting black and white film, well, they kind of floundered a bit their first few times working with color, producing these muddled palettes. It even took Hitchcock a few films to nail the richness of color cinematography. Despite this learning curve, Stevens does something that is hard to pull off: staging for story, composition, and character. Let me explain. Stevens cut his teeth shooting and directing silent comedy shorts and eventually comedy features. In comedy, you'll see it with all the great comedic directors. They bring the camera in when there's a good reaction and pull the camera out when there's a big gag. The goal of comedy filmmaking is to facilitate the laugh, whether it's the setup or the punchline. Staging, editing, and composition work with the timing and the rhythm of the jokes. Now, Stevens brings this wonderful knowledge with him to his more serious pictures, including Shane. Watch this scene. Notice how the staging and framing set up the characters in the story. The bad guy's back is to us. His arm is blocking Shane from the audience. He stands between the bond Shane forms with the viewer. His back is to us, meaning that he is not to be trusted. Then notice there's this negative space above Shane, which seems odd until he moves into it, standing eye to eye with the bad guy. Then the bar owner, a neutral character, walks between the two men in hopes of breaking up the argument. Neat, huh? While it may not appear to be as beautiful as Drive, it is just as good. By now, one starts to realize that Drive is a remake of Shane, whether intentional or not. I will say this: much like De Palma's Scarface, Drive is a transformative retelling of Shane. It offers an updated version of the same story and brings the characters more in line with today's world. It offers something new. The minor problem with Drive is the restrained performances and the beautiful cinematography. Whenever a filmmaker chooses a shot or a style, they have to ask questions like, am I sacrificing the performance for the style? The role of the camera is to facilitate the story, the performances, the emotional intent behind each action and reaction. While Drive looks great, it is a very restrained film, wrapped very tightly, and the performances can seem, well, underwhelming at times. It's a cool medium as opposed to the war medium of Shane. Now, the problem with Shane is that it is a victim of its era. Today it can come off as a bit hokey, like a saccharine Norman Rockwell painting. It's the personification of Capra-esque American family values, which might seem a little out of touch for today's audiences. Okay, the final showdown. Both films are great pieces of cinema. I'm kind of splitting hairs here, as it's hard to find many faults in these two great films. Their weaknesses are also their strengths, and vice versa. After studying the fundamentals of art and design in both films, it all boils down to one element of art. Call it an emotional awareness or an emotional response. While Drive moves the audience, at the end I'm only mildly sad for Ryan Gosling's character. But it is Shane, with its infamous ending, that drives home the element of an emotional response. Because Stevens included Joe as a pivotal character, Every time Alan Ladd heads for the mountains in the horizon to die alone, and Joey follows him part of the way, calling out to him teary-eyed, I start to cry. It turns even the most macho of men soft. We think of every friend who moved away, every relationship that ended, and all the people we have cared for who have passed on. Shane has what Buñuel said about great American films, a sincere, even if primitively so, emotional awareness, and a completely photogenic and totally cinematographic rhythm. It is this visceral, emotional response from the audience that George Stevens mastered, which makes Shane superior to Drive. It is the reason that this film, almost 70 years later, still holds a place in many people's hearts. Here are the last few minutes of each film. Notice the similarities between the timing and the action. It's essentially the same ending, told in two different ways.
Shane. I knew you could, Shane. I knew it. I knew it just as well as anything. Was that him? Was that Wilson?
That was him. That was Wilson, all right. He was fast. Fast on the draw. Joey, what are you doing here?
I'm sorry, Shane.
You don't have to be. You better run back.
Can I ride home behind you?
Afraid not, Joey.
Please, why not?
I gotta be going on.
Why, Shane?
Man has to be what he is, Joey. Can't break the mold. I tried it and it didn't work for me.
We want you, Shane.
Joey, there's no living with a killing. There's no going back from one. Right and wrong, it's a brand. A brand sticks. There's no going back. Now you run on home to your mother and tell her everything's all right. And there aren't any more guns in the valley.
Shane. It's bloody. You're hurt.
I'm all right, Joey. You go home to your mother and your father and grow up to be strong, straight. Joey, take care of them. Both of them.
Yes, Shane. We've never been able to shoot you if you'd have seen him.
Bye, little Joe.
He'd never even have cleared the holster, would he, Shane?